Would you describe this Congress, the 119th session of Congress, as a productive session?
I would.
You would. Do you know how many laws President Trump has signed thus far in this Congress?
I don't have that number.
The number's 5. Do you know how many laws he had signed at this juncture in his presidency in 2017?
I feel you must know that number.
I do. The number's 24. It just so happens that this president has signed the fewest laws of any president at this juncture in his presidency in the modern history of the country. Now, perhaps you define that as productive in terms of this Congress, but the myopic focus you all have taken on CRAs, in my view, obfuscates from the dearth of any substantive policies that we've been able to work together on over the course of these last 4 months to actually address the challenges that the American people are facing. But you may have a different definition of productive than me, it sounds like. And perhaps President Trump has a different definition of productive than he did during his first term. I want to talk a bit about, of course, the CRAs that we're here to discuss today. Help me understand your rationale for the constitutional underpinning of this CRA, right? So that is to say, do you believe that the EPA had the power to grant the waivers that they did to the states, or is it your position that the EPA did not have that authority?
I feel that California was initially granted the exemption from the federal preemption in order to deal with a unique problem that was occurring in Los Angeles. That was smog. And the intention of this waiver was never to allow California emission policies to restrict the automotive market across the entire country, as occurred with the Advanced Clean Car 2 as a rule.
So let me stop you there, not to get too technical, but the EPA concluded that California's actions and the actions of the other states were consistent with the waiver that it granted. So the agency determined that that was consistent with the waiver it had granted. So I'm just trying to understand do you believe that the EPA did not have the authority to grant the waiver?
I believe that the Biden EPA wrongly allowed an EV mandate that will affect the entire country. Congress, we in Congress, not California, is the only body that can regulate the interstate automotive market. And what works in the in Hollywood doesn't work in Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania.
I hear and I see you're reading from there. I get it. These aren't gotcha questions, so I think you answered it. I think your point, what you're saying is that you don't believe that the Biden administration, the EPA under the Biden administration, had the authority to grant the waivers that it did to these states.
I do not.
Okay. Do you believe that the Trump administration has the authority to grant waivers to polluters?
I do not believe that the Trump administration is granting waivers to
You don't?
polluters. I do not.
Are you familiar with this new announcement? I'll read you this article. This is just from 2 weeks ago. EPA offers industrial polluters a way to avoid rules on mercury, arsenic, and other toxic chemicals. Are you aware of that?
I believe that we're discussing the California.
No, I hear you.
today.
You just answered. You said that. I think your testimony a minute ago was that you're not aware that the administration is pursuing any potential waivers for polluters or for states, for that matter, to avoid compliance with the Clean Air Act. Right? Clearly, that's not. I guess you're not aware, but you're aware now, right? I've made you aware of that. Let me read you just a paragraph from this article. The EPA has set up an electronic mailbox to allow regulated companies to request a presidential exemption under the Clean Air Act to a host of Biden-era rules. Companies were asked to send an email by Monday seeking permission from President Donald Trump to bypass the new restrictions. This is a part of, a push to roll back dozens of environmental regulations. The Trump administration is offering coal-fired power plants and other industrial polluters a chance for exemptions for requirements to reduce emissions of toxic chemicals, such as mercury, arsenic, and benzene. You're familiar with this now?
With your reading, I think it is important that we return the discussion to what this CRA
I hear you, Mr. Joyce, I get it. You've testified at great length about this particular, I get why you're supporting the CRA. I understand that. seems like you don't want to talk about this, what they're calling the polluters portal. And I think you could understand why I would be frustrated and the people that I represent in Colorado would be frustrated. Because on the one hand, it sounds like you're taking the position that the EPA, under a Democratic administration, has no authority to grant a state an exemption to be able to impose standards that are a bit higher to protect clean air and clean water. But under the Trump administration, it seems like, unless you want to disabuse me of this, you're completely fine with the Trump administration granting exemptions to polluters to avoid the requirements of the Clean Air Act with respect to these chemicals that are regulated. Do you understand why that would strike people as a bit confounding?
The only confounding part that I recognize is how the Biden administration turns away from the free market and wants to allow a Biden-era EPA to enforce a rule onto my constituents that doesn't allow them to choose
You
and
said that a
buy
few times.
vehicle that they can afford. Choose and buy a vehicle that can drive them to and from work.
I get it. I get why you oppose this rule. I understand why you oppose this rule. Do you support these exemptions? What I'm saying to you is I understand. You've made it abundantly clear. You oppose the exemptions that were granted under the Biden administration. Do you support these exemptions that the Trump administration is poised to grant in the coming weeks to polluters in your district?
And I support
Is that a yes?
I support the Trump administration, and I support that the president is aware that the Biden-era mandates that were occurring last minute as he went out the door negatively affect the American people.
Well, I would just venture to suggest to you that if you're going to take the position that the EPA does not have the statutory or constitutional authority to grant exemptions to states that wish to impose standards on clean air and clean water that are higher than the federal government, it's probably a safe bet not to take the position that you've taken, which is that you are permitted, the EPA that is, to grant exemptions to any number of polluters to deviate from those very same standards. That is a inconsistent position, and I get that you disagree with me on that, but I'll digress. It sounds like one of the other reasons that you oppose the Biden-era rule, or why you support this CRA, is cost, right? Is prices. I heard an exchange previously with one of my friends on the other side of the aisle.
The financial impact
on consumers,
on my constituents and constituents across the United States.
And this is around car prices, right?
Specifically surrounding the EVs, the electric vehicles that consumers cannot afford and the consumers do not want.
And I assume you would agree with me, we don't want car prices going up, right? I mean, the last thing my constituents in Colorado want is the prices of their vehicles going up. And I assume the same is true of your constituents. Or is that not true? Or?
My constituents, and those across the United States want to pay for the vehicle that they want to choose, not the vehicle that the government mandates.
Sure. I didn't think this would be a point of disagreement. You're saying your constituents don't agree with my constituents that they don't want car prices to go up?
I think if a constituent wants to buy a more expensive vehicle, that is their choice. The whole discussion here
I hear you about that.
I don't want the federal mandate for that.
Okay. Now Mendez got you. Mr. Tonko, how about I ask you this question? Do the people of your district want prices of cars, generally, used cars, new cars, to go up?
No, of course not.
Okay. Sounds like that's not a controversial position. I think most Americans don't want the prices of their vehicles to go up. Is that right, Mr. Joyce? Or is that I can't get you to agree on that?
I think that they want to pay for the vehicle that they want to choose.
Okay, all right. Well, maybe I think I understand why you don't want to answer that question directly. And it's because you know that car prices are going up, right? That just 2 days ago, for the first time in 3 years, used car prices went up year to year, increase. You're aware of that, right? There's an article I can read to you. I don't want to go through the whole. There's an article from a Pennsylvania newspaper that I could quote to you that I can represent to you, attests that car prices are going up.
You bring an interesting point into the conversation, and that is my concern. As we decrease the number of internal combustion engines, which Americans want to buy, as we decrease those, we will see an increase in those costs if we force individuals into electric vehicles that they cannot afford.
So you don't think that the car prices going up, unlike every economist in our country has concluded, have nothing to do with the tariffs? That you think that is that's not a factor?
We saw used cars increase during COVID we saw that increase in used vehicles.
Correct. 4 years ago, during COVID, I don't really understand that. I'm not asking you about car prices during the COVID pandemic. What I'm asking you is,
the market drives what those costs are. And what my
and why do you
concern
think
is-
the market is changing right
And
now?
why the CRA is in place is that we are concerned that that is going to drive additional costs that America cannot
I see,
afford.
but you're not concerned at all about the tariffs.
I think that the tariffs are short-term pain for long-term gain.
Short-term pain. Let me just tell you, I'm not going to, I don't want to impugn your motives here. I can just tell you that my constituents in Colorado didn't sign up for the short-term pain that you're apparently comfortable with. They don't want car prices to go up. And the fact that you can't bring yourself to just even agree with me on that premise, the notion that generally speaking, we should try to keep costs low, to me speaks volumes. No one here is prepared to defend President Trump's reckless tariff policies and yet simultaneously refuse to concede to the reality that these policies are wreaking economic havoc in communities in Colorado and in your communities, sir. And I understand that we have a policy disagreement about this CRA, but what I am telling you is that for the first time in 3 years, used car prices on average went up 2 days ago, and there's a reason for it. So the reason is Mr. Trump's policies, not a CRA that just went into effect. So with that, Madam Chair, again, I appreciate your indulgence and giving me the opportunity to say a few words here, and I thank both gentlemen for testifying, and I yield back.